The first time my wife said she would rather be alone, I did not understand she was asking me to erase myself from her life. By 8:05 Monday morning, Madison Caldwell stood at the counter of a Starbucks on Maple Avenue, holding a $7 oat milk latte she could no longer pay for. The cashier ran her platinum card once, then twice, then a third time with that careful little smile people use when they are trying not to embarrass you in public. Behind her, two women from her marketing team pretended to study the menu, but I knew Madison well enough to know she could feel their eyes on the back of her neck. Her phone buzzed in her hand. First the bank, then the Mercedes dealership, then the leasing office downtown. 3 calls, 3 doors closing. She did not know it yet, but that was only the beginning. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 42 years old, born in Indiana, raised in Ohio, the kind of man who owns 2 pairs of work boots and still changes his own oil, even though he could pay someone else to do it. For 14 years, Madison told people I was dependable. Toward the end, she said it like an insult. Dependable became boring. Steady became small. Quiet became weak. She liked men in tailored jackets who talked about Napa weekends and stock options over cocktails. I wore canvas jackets, drove a 12-year-old Ford F-150, and came home smelling like cold storage warehouses and diesel from loading docks. To her friends, I looked like a man who had stopped climbing. To Madison, I looked like the life she thought she had outgrown. What she never understood was that some men do not show their money because they are ashamed of it. Some men hide it because they learned early that the loudest room is usually the weakest one. That Sunday night, I came home from Cincinnati with road salt on my truck and a dull ache behind my eyes. I had spent the weekend inspecting one of our refrigerated facilities, walking concrete floors at 34 degrees while Madison was at home drinking white wine with her friends in the living room I paid for. I opened the front door quietly. The house smelled like expensive candles and Chardonnay. Then I heard her laugh. Not the soft laugh she used to give me when we were young and eating pizza on the floor of our first apartment, but the bright, polished laugh she saved for people she wanted to impress. I stopped in the hallway, one hand still on my keys, and heard her say, clear as glass, being married to Ethan feels like being buried alive. Nobody corrected her. Nobody asked if she meant it. Her friends laughed, and after a second, Madison laughed too. I stood there in the dark, listening to a woman I had protected for 14 years describe my love like a prison sentence. I did not walk into the living room right away. That surprises people when I tell them now. They expect anger, a slammed door, some big emotional scene that would have made Madison the victim by sunrise. But men like me learn early that not every fire deserves gasoline. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand still and let people finish showing you who they are. So I stayed in the hallway with my keys resting against my palm, listening to Madison's friends pour more wine and ask questions they had no business asking. One of them, Brittany, laughed and said, "Then why are you still with him?" Madison sighed like she was carrying some terrible burden instead of sitting on a white sofa in a house with heated floors, custom cabinets, and a mortgage she had not paid $1 toward in 6 years. Because leaving is complicated, she said. Everything is tied together. The house, the accounts, the car, the memberships. Ethan made himself useful enough to be inconvenient. That sentence did something the first one had not. The first sentence hurt. This one clarified. In her mind, I was not a husband anymore. I was an obstacle with a debit card. I looked down at my boots, still marked with gray dust from the loading dock in Cincinnati, and for a second I saw the last 14 years in small, ordinary pictures. Madison asleep in the passenger seat during our first road trip to Tennessee. Madison crying in our kitchen after her first big job rejection. Madison handing me a stack of overdue credit card bills with shaking hands, whispering that she had messed up and did not know how to fix it. I fixed it. That was the role I had accepted without ever noticing it had become my name. Ethan fixes things. Ethan covers the gap. Ethan stays calm. Ethan understands. Ethan pays. From the living room, Madison said, I am almost 40. I cannot keep waking up next to a man who smells like cardboard boxes and freezer units. More laughter. Soft, cruel, comfortable laughter. The kind people make when they are sure the person being discussed is too far away to hear. I stepped back from the hallway and set my overnight bag down by the front closet. The thud was small, but the room went quiet. Not completely, just enough. A little pause in the music. A little break in the glassy rhythm of women pretending cruelty was honesty. Madison appeared first, walking into the foyer with a wineglass in one hand, and that startled look people get when their private performance suddenly has an audience. She was wearing a cream sweater I bought her in Chicago, gold earrings from our 10th anniversary, and the expression of someone trying to calculate how much I had heard. "Ethan," she said too brightly. "You are home early." I looked at her for a long second. Her friends were behind her now, half visible near the archway, their faces arranged into polite concern. I could have given her a chance to lie. I could have asked what she meant. But some questions are just invitations for someone to insult your intelligence. I hung my jacket on the hook and said, "Do you want me to leave the room so you can finish burying me, or were you done?" Brittany looked at the floor. Madison's mouth tightened. There it was, the flash of irritation, not shame. She was not sorry she said it. She was annoyed I had heard it. "Do not do this," she said quietly. "Not in front of people." I almost smiled at that. She had cut me open in front of people, then asked me not to bleed where they could see it. I nodded toward the living room and said, "You brought the audience, Madison." Her face hardened then, like a curtain dropping. The soft voice disappeared. The wife who used to ask me to warm her hands in November was gone, replaced by a woman who had been rehearsing her exit in mirrors and wine glasses for months. "Fine," she said. "You want honesty? I feel alone already. I feel like I am married to a shadow. You come home tired. You barely talk. You disappear into work, and everyone else is living while I am stuck here pretending this is enough." I did not interrupt. I let every word land. Not because they were fair, but because I wanted to remember them accurately. When she finished, the house felt still enough to hear the ice maker drop cubes in the kitchen. I asked her one question. "Is that what you really want, Madison? To be alone?" She lifted her chin, eyes bright with pride and wine and years of resentment she had polished into certainty. "Honestly, Ethan, I would rather be alone." I looked at the woman who had just mistaken my restraint for weakness, my provision for obligation, and my silence for emptiness. Then I reached into my pocket, turned my keys once around my finger, and said, "All right, I will make sure you get exactly what you asked for." I did not sleep in the guest room that night. I did not sleep at all. After Madison's friends left, after their tires whispered down the driveway, and the house settled into that strange, embarrassed quiet that follows a truth spoken too clearly, I went to my office and closed the door. Madison stayed in the kitchen for a while, opening cabinets she did not need to open, rinsing glasses that were already clean, moving through little chores like a woman trying to make the world feel normal again. Normal had left the house before midnight. I sat behind my desk, turned on the brass lamp my father gave me when I was 23, and looked at the framed photo beside my monitor. It was Madison and me outside a cheap motel near Gatlinburg, 14 years younger, both of us sunburned, broke, and smiling like we had discovered the secret to life. Back then, we had one checking account, 2 lawn chairs, and a used Corolla with a heater that only worked when it felt generous. She used to call me her calm place. I used to believe that meant something permanent. But permanence is a dangerous word. It makes you ignore small fractures until the whole ceiling starts to sag. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder with no label on it. Inside were copies of documents Madison had never cared enough to ask about. Operating agreements, trust papers, lease schedules, bank authorization forms. The bones under the skin of our comfortable life. I did not build it to impress her. That was the part she never understood. I built it because I knew what it felt like to be one bad month away from losing everything. My father ran a tire shop in Dayton until a hospital bill and one slow winter crushed him flat. I was 17 when I watched my mother count grocery money in quarters at the kitchen table. That sound never left me. Metal against wood. Pride getting smaller by the coin. So when I started working in cold storage after college, I paid attention. I learned freight routes, freezer systems, fuel costs, insurance language, and how much money moved through warehouses nobody at cocktail parties wanted to talk about. While Madison saw loading docks and steel doors, I saw arteries. Food, medicine, restaurant supply, grocery chains, contracts that did not care about trends or hashtags. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I bought small pieces when older partners wanted out. I rolled profit into property. I let people underestimate me because underestimation is cheap rent for a careful man. Madison thought my old truck meant I lacked ambition. She never understood that the truck was paid for, the house was protected, and the building where her favorite charity gala stored its catering equipment paid me rent every month. Around 1 in the morning, I heard her footsteps outside my office. They stopped at the door, then moved away. No apology came, not even a soft knock. That told me more than any argument could have. I opened my laptop and typed the password she always mocked me for changing every month. First, I sent an email to Daniel Mercer, my attorney in Columbus. Subject line, Monday execution. He would understand. We had discussed this before, quietly, months earlier, when I found the first sign that Madison was not just unhappy, but preparing. A consultation receipt from a divorce firm tucked inside a Nordstrom bag. Screenshots of account balances saved to her tablet. A message to Brittany saying, if I time it right, he will look like the one who walked out. I did not confront her then. I learned. I documented. I waited. That Sunday night was not the beginning. It was the permission slip. At 1:46, I emailed Rebecca Shaw, my accountant. At 2:10, I logged into the bank portal and removed Madison as an authorized user from 2 business-linked cards. At 2:28, I scheduled the Mercedes for company asset retrieval. At 3:15, I canceled my personal guarantee on the downtown apartment application she thought I did not know about. Every click sounded small, too small for what it meant. No shouting, no broken dishes, just clean digital sounds in a dark room while the woman upstairs slept under a roof she thought existed by accident. At 4:30, I leaned back and watched the first pale line of dawn press against the blinds. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would feel cruel. Instead, I felt the way a man feels when he finally stops holding a door shut against a storm that was never his to control. By 6:15 Monday morning, the house was pretending nothing had happened. The furnace clicked on. The coffee maker breathed steam into the kitchen. Somewhere upstairs, Madison's shower ran with that steady, expensive hiss from the rainfall fixture she had insisted we needed during the remodel. I stood at the counter in yesterday's shirt, drinking black coffee and watching the sky turn the color of old nickel through the bay window. There was a time when mornings in that kitchen felt safe. Madison used to come down barefoot, hair tied up, stealing the first sip from my mug before making her own. She would wrinkle her nose and say I drank coffee like a truck stop philosopher. I would tell her truck stop philosophers knew more about life than half the men in boardrooms. She used to laugh at that. Real laughter, not the polished kind she gave her friends. That memory moved through me quietly, like a car passing a house it used to own. At 6:40, she came downstairs in a charcoal blazer, white blouse, and the kind of confidence that came from believing the world still worked the way it had worked. Yesterday, she paused when she saw me. Her eyes flicked to my face, then to the coffee, then to the keys beside my hand. Are we going to talk about last night? She asked. The question sounded reasonable. That was Madison's gift. She could place a clean tablecloth over a cracked table and act surprised when it still leaned. I set my mug down. What part? She folded her arms. Do not be childish, Ethan. There it was. Not remorse. Not concern. Management. She wanted to turn a wound into a scheduling issue. I looked at the woman I had married, at the gold earrings from our 10th anniversary, at the wedding ring she still wore because it helped her look stable in photographs, and felt something inside me settle into its final shape. I heard you, I said. All of it. For the first time that morning, her confidence slipped. Not much. Just a small tightening near the mouth. I was upset. People say things. People say what they have been practicing, I said. Her eyes cooled. You are making this dramatic. I almost believed her for half a second, because old habits are loyal dogs. They come when called, even after they have been kicked. The old Ethan would have softened. He would have asked how to fix it. He would have apologized for working too much, for being too tired, for not understanding the shape of her loneliness. But the old Ethan had been standing in the hallway the night before, listening to his wife laugh, while strangers measured his worth in wine and pity. He did not make it to morning. Madison picked up her purse from the island and checked her phone. I have a breakfast meeting. We can discuss this later, when you are calmer. That word, calmer, hung in the kitchen like smoke. I had not raised my voice. I had not insulted her. I had not blocked the doorway or demanded an answer. I had simply stopped performing the role of a man desperate to be chosen. She mistook that for a mood. I nodded once. Drive safe. She gave me a look that said she expected more. A plea. A question. Some little proof that the floor under her feet was still mine to hold up. I gave her nothing. She walked out to the driveway, heels tapping across the porch. Boards, and climbed into the white Mercedes sedan she loved to park where the neighbors could see it. She did not know a company retrieval order had been scheduled for 8:40. She did not know the card in her wallet had been disconnected from the business account at 2:10 in the morning. She did not know the downtown leasing office had already received my withdrawal of guarantee. She only knew I had let her leave without chasing her, and that bothered her more than the argument itself. From the kitchen window, I watched the Mercedes back out beneath the bare maple tree. For 14 years, I had mistaken responsibility for love. I had thought keeping the lights on meant keeping the marriage alive. But lights can shine in an empty house. Engines can start with no destination worth reaching. As her car disappeared down the street, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel Mercer. Filing packet ready. Courier leaves at 9. I read it twice, then placed the phone face down on the counter. The coffee had gone cold, but for the first time in months, my hands were warm. At 8:05, Madison called me for the first time. I was already in my office at the main cold storage facility on the west side of Columbus, standing behind a glass wall that overlooked 40,000 square feet of concrete, steel racks, and controlled air cold enough to make every breath visible near the freezer doors. Forklifts moved below like yellow beetles under fluorescent light. Pallets of produce, dairy, and medical supplies rolled through lanes most people never notice, feeding restaurants, hospitals, and grocery stores across 3 states. It was not glamorous. It did not sparkle under chandeliers. But every square foot had a purpose, and every purpose paid. My phone lit up on the desk. Madison. I let it ring twice before answering. Is there a problem? I asked. The line crackled with street noise and restrained panic. My card is not working. She said it like the card had misbehaved, like some small inconvenience had stepped out of line. I looked through the glass as a loading bay door opened and morning light spilled across the floor. Which card? I asked, though I knew. The platinum one. The business one. The one I always use. Her voice sharpened around the edges. I am at Starbucks, Ethan. It declined in front of people. There it was. Not fear. Not confusion about us. Embarrassment. The first real wound of her morning was not losing access. It was being seen losing access. I sat down slowly. That card was connected to Caldwell Logistics Holdings. Silence. Then, colder, so you are not part of Caldwell Logistics Holdings. I could hear her breathing change. In 14 years, Madison had developed a talent for turning practical matters into emotional crimes. If the cable bill was late, I was neglectful. If dinner reservations were missed, I did not value her. If I asked about spending, I was controlling. But this time, there was no fog to blow into the room. Just facts. Clean, square, hard facts. You shut off my card? She asked. I removed an unauthorized user from a business account. I am your wife. I looked down at the folder Daniel's courier had delivered just before 8. You made it clear last night that role no longer suited you. She gave a short, stunned laugh. The kind people make when they are trying to outrun fear with attitude. You are punishing me because I vented to my friends. No, I said. I am separating what is mine from what you said you no longer wanted. The line went quiet again. I pictured her standing there in her blazer, cheeks warm, phone pressed to her ear, the paper coffee cup still on the counter like evidence. A year earlier, that image would have pulled me out of my chair. I would have apologized to the cashier through the phone if I could have. I would have transferred money, smoothed the moment, made her world soft again. That was the old reflex. Protect Madison from consequences. Catch the glass before it hit the floor. But a man cannot spend his life diving for things someone else keeps throwing. At 8:18, my assistant, Grace, knocked once and opened the door. Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Mercer is online too. Also, Fleet Services confirmed the retrieval window. I covered the phone with my palm and nodded. Madison heard enough to stop breathing for half a second. Retrieval window? She asked. I leaned back in my chair and watched a crew chief sign off on a refrigerated load bound for Indianapolis. The Mercedes is a company vehicle. Her voice dropped. Ethan, do not embarrass me at work. That almost got a laugh out of me, not because it was funny, but because it was perfect. After everything she had said in our living room, after turning my name into a punchline, she was still asking me to manage the way the world saw her. I did not raise my voice. I did not enjoy the fear starting to show beneath her words. I simply told the truth. I am not embarrassing you, Madison. I am removing the parts of my life you were using as costume jewelry. At 8:40, while she was still arguing with me, the tow truck reached our driveway. At 8:43, Madison called again, and this time the polish was gone. I could hear whine through the phone, the kind of sharp Ohio morning wind that cuts between buildings and turns every breath thin. Behind it came the low diesel rumble of a tow truck engine. "There is a man in our driveway," she said. "He says he has paperwork to take my car." My car. That was the phrase she chose. Not the company car. Not the vehicle attached to Caldwell Logistics Holdings. My car, because Madison had always believed possession was the same thing as ownership if she looked good enough standing beside it. I signed a delivery receipt on my desk and said, "Then he is doing his job. Ethan, stop this right now." Her voice shook, but pride kept trying to hold it upright. I looked through the glass wall at the warehouse floor, where a line of refrigerated trucks waited under gray morning light. Every driver down there knew the rule. If a load was not yours, you did not touch it. If a seal was broken, you documented it. If paperwork did not match, the shipment did not move. Simple rules. Honest rules. Marriage should have worked that way too. But Madison had been moving through my life for years with no paperwork in her heart, only assumptions. "I cannot stop a lawful retrieval," I said. "The vehicle belongs to the company. You gave it to me. I allowed you to use it." The difference sat between us like a locked gate. She hated it. I could feel that through the line. "Do you know how humiliating this is?" she whispered. "At least 3 neighbors are watching." I turned my chair toward the window. Outside my office, frost still clung to the edge of the parking lot. "That seems to matter a lot to you this morning." She went quiet. For a second, I thought the words had finally reached something real under all that performance. Then she said, "You are enjoying this." I closed my eyes. That accusation landed softer than she probably wanted it to, because it was not true. Enjoyment is loud. It dances around. What I felt was quieter and heavier. It was the exhaustion of a man finally setting down a couch he had carried alone up 3 flights of stairs while the other person complained about the color. "No, Madison," I said. "I am not enjoying it. I am just done preventing it." A metallic clank came through the phone, followed by her sharp inhale. The Mercedes was being secured to the tow bed. I imagined the white sedan lifting slightly, the rear tires leaving the driveway where she used to park at an angle so the emblem faced the street. That car had been part of her costume. The blazer, the earrings, the expensive yoga studio, the charity luncheons, the casual complaint that Ethan was always working while she built a life of taste and connections. She did not see that taste requires funding, and connections often evaporate when the funding disappears. At 9:15, the next call came from the downtown leasing office, not Madison. A young man named Tyler confirmed they had received my withdrawal of personal guarantee for the apartment application on Riverside Drive. I thanked him and asked for written confirmation by email. My voice sounded calm, professional, almost ordinary. That was the strange part. The world does not add thunder when your marriage ends. Phones still ring. Coffee still cools. Trucks still need dispatch numbers. People still say have a good one after handing you documents that change your life. At 9:22, Madison texted me a screenshot of the leasing portal. "Application suspended. Guarantor removed." Under it, she wrote, "Are you trying to make me homeless?" I stared at that message longer than I should have. She was standing in a 4-bedroom house with a pantry full of food, a walk-in closet bigger than my first apartment, and enough jewelry upstairs to cover rent in most Midwestern towns for a year. But she did not mean homeless. She meant without the version of herself she had planned to unveil downtown, away from me, funded by me, while telling everyone she had finally chosen independence. I typed slowly, "You are not homeless. You are no longer using my signature to finance your exit." 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again, then nothing. That silence was the first honest thing she had given me all morning. At 10 o'clock, Daniel Mercer arrived at the facility in a navy overcoat, carrying a leather folder and the expression of a man who believed emotions were important, but paperwork was safer. We sat across from each other in the conference room while forklifts beeped beyond the wall. He slid the separation packet toward me. "Once this is delivered, she will understand the scope," he said. I looked at the thick stack of pages, all those clean margins and numbered clauses trying to contain 14 years of birthdays, arguments, mortgage payments, vacations, disappointments, and silence. She already understands the inconvenience, I said. The scope will be new. Daniel did not smile. He just nodded and handed me a pen. The ink moved across the page smoothly. Too smoothly. My signature looked exactly like it had on anniversary cards, tax returns, home repairs, and every document that had built the life Madison thought was beneath her. By 10:30, the courier was on his way. By 10:45, Madison's friend stopped answering her calls. By 11:20, Madison discovered the loneliest place in America is not an empty house. It is a full contact list where nobody wants to answer. Brittany sent her to voicemail. Claire replied with one sentence about being in meetings all day. Vanessa, the same woman who had laughed into a wine glass the night before, read 2 messages and left them hanging in blue silence. That was when Madison drove herself back to our house in a rideshare, sitting in the back seat like a guest in her own collapse. The driver dropped her at the curb because the Mercedes was gone. The driveway looked too wide without it, and the neighbors across the street were suddenly very interested in taking out trash that did not need taking out. I was not there, but the security camera showed enough. Madison stood at the end of the driveway for almost a full minute, purse on her shoulder, hair moving in the wind, staring at the blank space where her favorite proof of success used to sit. Then she walked inside. At 11:43, she called again. This time she was not shouting. Shouting requires the belief that the world can still be forced back into place. Her voice had gone thin. The courier came, she said. I leaned against the conference room window with Daniel sitting behind me, reviewing final notes on a yellow legal pad. Then you received the packet. Separation agreement. She read, like the words were written in another language. Temporary financial boundaries. Asset classification. Revocation of access. Paper rustled through the phone. Ethan, what is all of this? The beginning of clarity. She laughed once, but it broke halfway through. Clarity? You sent a legal packet to your wife before lunch. My attorney sent legal notice to a person who told me she wanted a life without me. The silence after that was long enough for me to hear a forklift backing up behind a glass. 3 beeps, steady and distant, like a countdown nobody else noticed. When she spoke again, the anger had returned, but now it sounded borrowed. You had this ready. Nobody prepares this overnight. There it was. The first real door opening. Not apology. Not regret. Suspicion. Madison was finally close enough to the truth to feel the heat coming off it. I looked at Daniel. He lifted his eyes from the paper, but said nothing. He knew this part mattered. I said, you are right. Her breathing stopped. What does that mean? I walked back to the table and opened the folder in front of me. On top was the consultation receipt from Franklin and Moss Family Law, dated 3 months earlier. Under it were printed screenshots. Messages. Notes. Account searches. A draft budget for her downtown apartment with my guarantee listed beside it like I was a utility service she planned to keep after canceling the marriage. It means I knew, I said. About what? But her voice had already changed. People ask questions differently when they fear the answer. About Franklin and Moss. About the apartment. About the screenshots of our accounts. About the message you sent Brittany saying if you timed it right, I would look like the one who abandoned the marriage. Nothing moved on the line. Not air. Not pride. Not even denial. For months, Madison had carried a secret plan like a pearl under her tongue, smooth and hidden. Now she realized I had been holding a mirror under the table the entire time. You went through my things, she said finally. It was almost impressive, the way she tried to drag the conversation away from what I found and toward how I found it. I found a receipt in a shopping bag you left on the kitchen island, I said. After that, I protected myself. You spied on me. No, I paid attention. That sentence seemed to land harder than the rest. Maybe because Madison had survived for years on my refusal to do exactly that. I had trusted the shape of our life more than the details inside it. I had believed a wedding ring meant we were facing the same direction. But trust without attention is not love. It is negligence dressed as loyalty. She lowered her voice. I was scared. For a second, the old reflex stirred again. I saw the young woman from Gatlinburg, sunburned and smiling beside a motel ice machine, telling me she felt safe with me. I wanted that version to be real. I wanted it so badly it almost made me stupid. Then I looked at the message where she had called me useful enough to be inconvenient, and the reflex died quietly. No, Madison, I said. You were not scared. You were planning to use me as the floor while you walked out the door. She whispered my name, not like a wife, but like someone testing whether a key still fit. Before I could answer, Grace opened the conference room door and said, "She is here." I turned toward the front windows. Madison was walking across the parking lot in her charcoal blazer, separation packet clutched against her chest, and for the first time all morning, she looked smaller than the life she had been pretending to own. Madison entered my facility like a woman walking into the wrong version of her own story. She had been there twice in 14 years, both times for holiday parties where the office staff put out cookies and I introduced her to drivers whose names she forgot before we reached the parking lot. To her, the place had always been a cold building full of forklifts, pallet wrap, and men in work gloves. She never saw the contracts moving through it. She never saw the money. She never saw the leverage. That morning, the lobby lights made her look tired in a way makeup could not negotiate with. Her charcoal blazer was still sharp, but her confidence had wrinkles now. She held the separation packet against her chest like it might protect her from the building itself. Grace stood behind the reception desk, professional as ever, but I caught the flicker in her eyes. Everybody who works in logistics learns to read damage fast. A dented box. A leaking pallet. A driver pretending a delay is weather when it is really paperwork. Madison was paperwork damage wearing gold earrings. I stepped into the lobby with Daniel Mercer at my side. Madison looked at him first, then at me, and that seemed to sting her more than the packet. She wanted a private husband she could bend with memory. Instead, she found a man standing beside counsel. "We need to talk alone," she said. Daniel answered before I could. "Given the legal notice delivered this morning, I recommend all substantive conversation happen with representation present." Her eyes flashed. "I am not talking to you." Then she looked at me. "Ethan, tell him to leave." There was a time when that tone would have worked. Not because it was loving, but because it sounded familiar. Marriage trains you to respond to certain notes in a person's voice. A sigh can pull you across a room. A wounded look can make you apologize for things you did not do. But familiarity is not authority. Not anymore. "Daniel stays," I said. Madison swallowed. Behind her, the automatic doors opened and closed as a warehouse supervisor came in with a clipboard, saw the room, and wisely kept moving. The cold air from outside followed him in, curling around Madison's ankles. She lowered her voice. "You are humiliating me at your workplace." I looked around the lobby. Framed safety certificates. A vending machine humming near the hallway. A stack of visitor badges in a plastic tray. "No," I said. "You came here." She blinked, and for the first time, I saw panic win a small battle against pride. "My car is gone. My car does not work. The apartment is frozen. My friends are acting like I am contagious. What did you expect me to do?" I stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough that she had to look at me instead of the packet. "I expected you to enjoy the independence you were planning." That landed. Her mouth opened, closed, then tightened. "That is not fair. Fair was 14 years of me building a life while you called it a cage. Fair was me paying down your debt while you told your friends I was useful. Fair was me finding out you had already met with a divorce lawyer and still saying nothing until you decided to insult me in my own house." Her eyes flicked toward Daniel again. She hated that someone else was hearing this. Not because it was private, because it was accurate. She hugged the packet tighter. "I was angry," she said. "I was confused. Brittany pushes me. You know how she is." There it was, the first offering from the emergency basket. Blame the friend. Blame the wine. Blame the moment. Blame anything except the woman who had been building an exit ramp with my signature underneath it. I shook my head slowly. Brittany did not schedule the apartment tour. Brittany did not screenshot account balances. Brittany did not write that if you timed it right, I would look like the one who abandoned you. Madison's face changed then. Not dramatically, just a small collapse around the eyes, like a porch light burning out. "You were never supposed to see that." The honesty was so accidental it almost hurt. I let the sentence sit there. Daniel stopped writing. Even Grace, 10 feet away, went still behind her desk. Madison realized what she had said and looked down at the marble tile. "That is not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant." My voice stayed calm, and that seemed to frighten her more than anger would have. Anger gives people something to fight. Calm gives them a wall. She took one step closer. "Ethan, please. I did not mean alone like this." There it was. The line I had known was coming since 8:05. Not "I am sorry." Not "I betrayed your trust." Not "I forgot who stood beside me." She did not regret wanting me gone. She regretted discovering how much of her life had been held together by the man she wanted gone. I looked through the interior window behind her, out toward the warehouse floor, where workers moved with quiet purpose in the cold. Men and women checking seals, reading labels, doing the kind of invisible work that keeps America fed, stocked, and moving. That was the world I understood. Wait. Timing. Accountability. If something was removed from a system, the system changed. Madison had removed respect from our marriage and expected the benefits to keep flowing. "Madison," I said, "you did not want a husband. You wanted a sponsor who did not talk back." Her eyes filled, but I did not step forward. Some distance, once earned, has to be honored. She whispered, "So what happens now?" Daniel slid a copy of the packet onto the reception counter. I looked at the woman I had loved, the woman who had mistaken quiet for weakness and loyalty for stupidity, and gave her the only mercy I had left. "Now," I said, "we let the paperwork tell the truth." The paperwork did what emotion never could. It made the room honest. Madison stood in my lobby with the packet open in her hands, reading the life she thought she understood translated into clauses, dates, signatures, and ownership lines. The house was protected by a trust created before our marriage. The Mercedes belonged to Caldwell Logistics Holdings. The business cards were tied to operating accounts she had no legal role in. The country club membership was a company relationship account. The downtown apartment was never hers because my guarantee had been the only thing holding the application upright. None of it was revenge on paper. That was the part she could not fight. It was structure. It was documentation. It was the quiet architecture of a life I had built while she was busy calling it ordinary. Madison looked up slowly. "So I get nothing?" she asked. Daniel Mercer adjusted his glasses. "That is not what the document says. It outlines a lawful separation of marital property, temporary support considerations, and the preservation of premarital and business assets." She stared at him like he had spoken in cold water. "So I get nothing I wanted," she said. Nobody corrected her. Some truths do not need help standing. I watched her fingers tighten around the packet, and for a moment, I felt the grief of it all instead of the anger. 14 years does not disappear because one person finally signs a legal notice. It lingers in the room. It hides in birthdays, in roadside diners, in old photographs you cannot throw away because the people in them were real, even if they did not survive. I had loved Madison. That was the worst part. Not the money, not the betrayal, not the humiliation. The worst part was knowing I had loved someone so completely that I kept calling her disappointment a phase, her contempt stress, her distance ambition. I had renamed every warning sign until the language finally ran out. Madison lowered her voice. "We can fix this." The words were soft, but they arrived too late, wearing the wrong clothes. I looked at her, at the woman who had not asked to fix us when she thought she had the upper hand, and said, "No, Madison, we can settle this. That is different." Her eyes filled again, but this time she did not perform the tears. They came quietly, and that made them harder to watch. She nodded once, like the motion cost her something. "I did not know you were all of this," she whispered. That sentence should have felt like victory. It did not. It felt like a receipt printed after the store had closed. "You did not want to know," I said. "You wanted the benefits without the burden of respecting where they came from." Outside the lobby windows, the morning had turned bright and hard. Trucks rolled through the gate, tires hissing over damp pavement, carrying food, medicine, and supplies to people who would never know my name. That was fine. I had never needed applause from strangers. I had only wanted peace at home. Somewhere along the way, I had confused peace with silence. Madison looked past me toward the warehouse floor. For the first time, she seemed to see it not as a cold building, but as a kingdom she had mocked because it did not look like one in photographs. "What happens to me now?" she asked. I thought about giving her a lecture. Character, gratitude, consequences, all the words men say when they want pain to sound wise. But I was tired of speeches. I was tired of carrying the emotional furniture of a house already empty. "You live the life you chose," I said, "and I will live the one I stopped postponing." Daniel gathered his folder. Grace returned to her desk. The facility kept moving around us, indifferent and steady, the way the world always does when one person's illusion ends. Madison wiped her face, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the automatic doors. They opened with a soft mechanical sigh. She paused at the threshold, like part of her expected me to call her back. For 14 years, I might have. That morning, I let the doors close behind her. By Monday afternoon, I was back in my old Ford, driving west toward a farmhouse outside Springfield I had bought 6 months earlier under a company trust. The sky was pale blue, the fields flat and winter brown, and the cab smelled faintly of coffee, leather, and motor oil. My phone buzzed once with a message from Madison. I did not open it. I just kept driving. Because the final twist was not that I made her lose everything. The final twist was that I finally understood I had been losing myself long before she lost me.